Sonic Frontiers is going to be one of the biggest seismic shifts for the Sonic franchise. With the release date of next week, fans of the franchise are eagerly waiting to see what awaits on the Frontiers. See what I did there? And we've already seen countless opinions on what we've been presented so far, like if there's any momentum, are the Cyberspace stages worth your time, why are we seeing the same 4 level themes over and over? But I want to introduce a bigger question, one that might be on the back burner for most of us. Where do we go from here? And with everything else surrounding this new entry, what's really waiting on the Frontiers for the Sonic fanbase? Well, to answer one of those questions, it's the fanbase itself, and how it's probably going to go through one of the biggest shifts to date that will determine the next move for Sega and the future of the Sonic franchise. So here's last video's context, and let's break it down. So we all know from the beginning of this year that the general consensus for Sonic Frontiers is that it was looking very debatable, but the perception across the board has improved, including those outside of the Sonic niche. Heck, we're getting people who haven't played a Sonic game in over a decade genuinely curious about Sonic as a video game mascot again. Not to mention, Sega is also moving Sonic away from just being a video game character and into a multimedia franchise, given its success on the Sonic movie and its sequel. So the capacity for this new generation is already exceeding critical acclaim. But the cherry on top, ever since the premiere for Sonic Frontiers during the TGX convention, Sega has successfully managed to regain the Japanese market since over several decades. Now, if all of this isn't monumental, then I'd like to see you just try and topple over this conglomerate of achievements. Anyways, the reason I bring this all up is because it's very clear that Sega is preparing to bring a new influx of people, and with that comes a bit of an issue, or something they should respectfully keep in mind. Let me explain what I mean by this by using an example. Some of the level design, as you may have seen, are taken from past titles. Not just the Boost titles, but also stuff from the Adventure era. This one specifically is taken from Sonic Adventure 2, as longtime fans may have realized, but most of these same type of fans see this as an issue, perceiving this as a lazy way to accomplish level design, especially when the level themes have been done several times over. But people who are getting into this game without this biasness, or at least have not actively been following the Sonic franchise for a while, might not even care to know the difference. There's also the fact that the Cyberspace levels are going to initially be treated as another Boost title, and therefore again, longtime fans might have an issue with grasping the controls, especially since all the customization features are not present for these stages, while others will just see this as just another game where they're going to pick up and learn how to play without previous experience with the Boost formula. You can start to see the pattern here. We all know how volatile this fanbase can be, but it's important to be aware that this is a distinct phase, an in-between phase, where Sega is beginning to move Sonic past the Boost era and settle down in this more multimedia era. So there's going to be a lot more people coming into the franchise with differing opinions, which will potentially create a whole new Sonic fanbase. Or is it actually new? Or rather, re-established? Let's think about it for a second. Let me bring in the next question on where Sega is going to go from here. Well, it's clear that at this point, we can't possibly go back from this, as Sega has now set a new precedent for itself, creating bigger expectations, and one of them being is the advertised open zone experience, which is very similar to a previous design concept from another Sonic title. You guessed it, Sonic Adventure. Come to think of it, there's a lot of nods to Sonic Adventure and the Adventure series. There's Big the Cat and his fishing minigame, an emphasis on storytelling, modernized level layouts from the Adventure series, a Chaos Zero lookalike. Heck, there's even a nod to Egg Viper in the little prequel comic for Sonic Frontiers. And the similarities go on and on. But based on the interviews with Iizuka and his sudden interest in wanting to pursue a Sonic Adventure-esque remake, I think that's definitely going to be the logical next step. Though maybe not an adventure remake per se, but going back to the style of 3D adventure that was presented in the late 90s, this time in a way that goes past the limitations of technology during that era. Now we have the luxury of a better expansive overworld that Iizuka probably had envisioned way back when, where all the action stages were interconnected through these types of hub worlds, which is kind of what we're seeing with Sonic Frontiers, where the overworld brings you to these cyberspace stages, albeit they're still used a little bit differently, and obviously it's an over 20+ year gap. but there does seem to be a lot more to do in Sonic Frontiers than in Sonic Adventure. Now, if only they can add the Chow Garden. I digress. It seems like this is Sega's biggest opportunity to re-establish the Adventure series. And to circle back on what I said earlier about re-establishing the Sonic fanbase, a lot of people, such as myself, where we haven't exactly followed through with the game since the Adventure era, are starting to come back and see a close eye on this game's release. This is exactly the seismic shift I'm referring to. It's not necessarily new, but it's coming full circle back to the expectations the series had, both with the kind of ambition Iizuka is trying to recontextualize and the state of the fanbase/public opinion on Sonic as a platformer. That's why my opinion on the game isn't as harsh as what many people would hope. I tell myself that if this is a bridge to move Sonic into a different era, then I can see how Iizuka, Ian Flynn, and everyone working on the game is trying to prepare their fans for it. Now, it doesn't excuse the new entry if it's game-breaking, or its constant pandering to Green Hill fans, but as a developer myself, I can understand when shortcuts need to be made, especially when you're going through a completely new concept for Sonic. We definitely don't want another case of Sonic 06, or Sonic Boom for that matter. To be honest, these minor things of Sonic being slightly slower, or not being able to balance on a rail as a mechanic, is fat that needed to be trimmed in order to expand the franchise towards a new general audience. Focusing on these minute details when there is being extra care placed into various other categories dismisses the overall picture Sonic Frontiers is trying to achieve through its visual design, fantastic sound design, story, aesthetic, and gameplay, which again, put together, all remind me of Sonic Adventure. I can finally see why Iizuka keeps emphasizing on calling it an open zone rather than an open world. I really initially thought that this was just Sonic shifting into an open world environment, but given these similarities, it's more fitting to perceive the game as an expansion on what the Adventure series already established. It's meant to solve the problem of only having the hub world be there to give you access to the action stages, and instead flip it on its head, where now the hub world is the main focus, and the action-like stages are just one thing to do in it. Sega also solved the problem of enemies just being boost fodder or just a way to homing attack into another area, where again it's yet another set piece that contributes to the hub world, and a dynamic one at that. And speaking of set pieces, remember we will be streaming Sonic Frontiers next week so that we can explore it for ourselves, where you as the viewer will be deciding which ones I try to focus on. Sega seems to have tried their best on solutions to things past games had a problem with, and in a way that's supposed to please everyone. Then again, not everyone can be pleased. With all this footage, it's safe to assume that the game is going to be fun, and a great new breath of fresh air for many, or at least mid at worst. Which, let's be honest with ourselves, by taking off those rose-colored glasses, most Sonic games tend to be mid in the eyes of most people outside of the Sonic franchise. So the fact that we're getting a glance of curiosity from any one of them has to count for something, right? So prepare yourselves for all these brand new people joining in, for Sega to start using the new foundation to propel Sonic, for all this momentum, by not only being respectful, but subscribing, since it only takes about 2 seconds for this absolutely free content, and you could always change your mind later. Mr. Bane out.